Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you very much for attending today's program celebrating the month of Pride at the Pasadena Public Library. And today celebrations include, as you know, pride parades, picnics, parties, workshops, symposias, and concerts. And we are delighted to be as part of the Pasadena Public Library presenting a program for this very, very important month. Memorials are held during this month for those who have been lost to hate crimes or HIV/AIDS. The purpose of the commemorative month is to recognize the impact that LGBTQ individuals have had on the history locally, nationally, and internationally. And we are exceptionally proud as the Pasadena Public Library to be welcoming Gayla Turner today to be presenting her family history and the history of her grandmother. This is her book, Don't You Dare. We have it, I haven't started my video. We have it in the Pasadena Public Library to be cataloged. It will be cataloged and it will shortly be available to you to check out. But this is the cover. It is a fascinating book. Gayla has done an immense amount of original research. She will tell you how she discovered writing this special book and all of the research that she did. It is a compelling story that weaves together a current day journey of discovery and a true life love story between two women that took place over 100 years ago. Newspaper headlines and stories back then didn't mention LGBTQ plus people. The community loved and lived in the background of a society because it was too dangerous to do otherwise. All were hidden, just like the wedding photos belonging to Gayla Turner's grandmother, Ruby. And it is the photo that started Gayla on this very exciting and extensive journey. And we are just delighted to be able to welcome Gayla today. So if you could please mute yourself after Gayla's presentation, we will have a chat and Gayla will be answering all of your questions. Also, some of you probably take the time to read Pasadena Now, and there was a fabulous article of an interview of Gayla in Pasadena Now. And so I hope you have a time to read it. And if you look in the chat, we have put the link to the Pasadena Now article. So welcome, Gayla. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's amazing to be here and being with the Pasadena Public Library is kind of a returning back home for me. It feels that the story in a lot of ways started formulating in a library because of the research I was doing. So it's kind of fun to kind of go do that full circle. So I'm really excited to be here. And one of the things, going back to the library is, the research started after I found my grandmother's photos. And I like to say it's a story that found me rather than me finding a story. When I first found the photos, I didn't know what to do with them. There was a good 2 years that I had the photos and I had them in a box in back of the closet thinking, okay, what am I going to do with these? I knew they were important to me, but it wasn't really until I started writing the story or starting to do the research about the women in the photos that I really kind of occurred to me how important this was to our LGBTQ community. Because one of the things I looked at or was trying to find when I was doing research was history about the LGBTQ community 100 years ago. And although we've always been there in history, there really wasn't a lot of research that I could kind of say, okay, this is a good way to start. Gives me some background. So it was really kind of digging into it from the very beginning and not having a lot of research and which is good in a way because it didn't give me any preconceived notion as far as what it may have been like. So I really had the luxury of kind of making that determination myself and looking at the research and the articles that I was finding and building on that as a storyline was something that I think was almost an advantage to me with this story because, like I said, there's nothing that I can say that I could compare it to because it was all new. And I'm not a professional historian. I'm not historically trained. I'm a person that, I'm not even really proclaimed to be thinking that I ever want to write a book. This was not in my scope of things to do. Up until like 10 years ago, I was perfectly happy working in the bank as a bank executive and kind of doing my thing. But this is a story that I didn't think I could tell initially. And I tried to get a lot of my, being in Los Angeles and from Los Angeles, I have a lot of really talented friends here. And I asked a couple of them, I go, this is what I have. I have these photos. I found these photos and I started telling them the story about my grandma Ruby and the other woman in the photos. And then I found another group of a larger kind of a subculture of women that found a way to meet. I would go into this really elaborate story about my research that I found. And they're kind of like looked at me like, no, and every one of them told me exactly the same thing. And they're like, Gayla, this is really your story to tell. I can't tell your story for you. And it's like, but I'm not a writer. So what do I do? That's where I kind of threw myself into the entire writing experience. I joined writing groups. I went to writing conferences. I hired a writing coach, critique groups, and just kind of really for a good 7 years, just really kind of figured out how to write because writing creatively was something that was not in my forte. Like I said, I've been in banking for 30 years. So writing something creative was not something I had planned to do. But as I got deeper and deeper into the research, I kind of did realize that my friends were right, that I had to tell this story. And it was a story of my grandmother Ruby, but it was also a story about, our community and the fact that we have always been there in society, but it was just too dangerous to come out. And I think a lot of people think that, LGBTQ community didn't start really coming out until like 50 years ago, but that's absolutely not true. We've always been there. And it kind of just speaks to the notion that, our story needs to be told and it deserves to be told. And I think it's a good way for people to understand who we are in our culture. The book I wrote I started offering it as more of a love story between Ruby and the woman in the photo with her, because I realized it was kind of almost a classical love story that could never be. It was sad because when I would look at the photos, I knew that their joy in the photos was very short-lived because in that period of time, you really weren't free to pursue your heart. You had to have a very conventional, it was kind of like laid out for you. At that time, there was a lot of things going on politically within our culture, a lot of, immigrants coming in from Europe. A lot of people were not happy about that. So they had a lot of the different groups that were trying to really kind of curtail that behavior. So you had, the Comstock Act, and you had some other things that were coming into play that really did dictate to people, how they should live their lives. And if you look at that in some cases, that's kind of what's playing out now, is a little bit of a return of that history of people saying how other people should live their lives. And I'm not going to go into the political aspect of it, but I think you understand that in saying that I want our story to be told not only for preservation of who we are. I think it's also important that our young people understand, where we came from and how we got here. The struggles that we had were not easy, and they're still not easy. And just because we now have that right to be married, I think some people thought that, okay, well, now our world is fixed. We don't have to be afraid anymore. We can walk down the street and hold the hands of our lover and not be afraid. But the sad part of that is that we still have a long way to go. Even though the Marriage Act, we can get married to the person we love, there's a part of us that's always afraid. And now that all kind of depends where you live. Being in Los Angeles or another progressive city, you don't have the same worries as a person that lives maybe in a very rural area in the country. That's one of those things that it's still hard to kind of wrap my brain around, the fact that in some places you are still in danger if you show who you love openly. And so when I looked at the photos of Ruby and the other women in the photos, it just tugged at my heart, because for all intents and purposes, that's as far as their love really could go, was the photos. And in most cases, they would have to destroy the photos or hide them, and hope that they're never found, because if they would have been found back then, the consequences were very real and they were very dangerous for them. And that's one of the things I think is so remarkable, is that my grandmother was so brave to keep these photos. And I think she really did that to remind herself of what love is, what love should be. And keeping those photos was a reminder for her. And, the funny thing about it is that the photos themselves, nobody knew about these photos in my family. There was no word ever talked about where these photos came from, or who they, how they got here. It was just a box in my mother's closet that's on the side of it was these old brown, kind of crinkly, this old cardboard boxes that said mother's photos on them. And then when I started putting all the pieces together and realizing that this was a really big part and an important part of my grandmother's life, and she wanted to keep those. And the other important part is that I found the photos, because if my brother or sister would have found these same photos, they likely would not have seen what I saw. And they wouldn't have been able to identify really, what took place with my grandmother and this other woman. And also then going into doing the research and finding out the whole subculture of women that found a way to really meet and love each other in a very small town in Wisconsin. So I'm just really thrilled that my research, it taught me a lot. It was really important for me to understand the research and in the important part that it played in my life. I went to a couple of libraries. Most of my time in libraries in the last few years have been to research. I went to Amherst, Wisconsin 2 times within the last 7 years to do research. And the last time I was in Wisconsin was on the anniversary of when the wedding photos were taken. And so that was June 8th, 1915, when the photos were taken. So I went to Amherst, Wisconsin on June 15, 2015. And I stood on the ground where the photos were taken, because I knew where they were taken. They were on a small family home in Wisconsin, and going back there and standing, I still kind of get those goosebumps thinking about it, because wow, I think, my grandmother Ruby didn't have the luxury of loving who she loved. I do. I know I identify as a lesbian, and I'm proud of that. And, I'm just proud that I can represent and tell the story for not only myself and for my grandma Ruby, but for a lot of people. It's amazing that, I talked to people about the story when I was writing it. And a lot of them would say, you know what, there's always been this Aunt Sally or Uncle Pete or someone in the family that I think may have been gay, but I'm not sure. And so I think it's so interesting that, everyone has that relative in their history that they go, they think that they might have been gay. And like, they probably were. So I think it's just shedding light and opening up the possibility that yes, they probably were gay, but they couldn't live in the openness that we have now in most cases. So once again, it's just a story that it's a love story. It's written to entertain. It's also it's written to educate, and I hope people will take that for what it is and use that as just a way to experience life and look at life a little bit better and seeing that we have always been there in our history.
Thank you so much, Gayla, for sharing that with us. Your book is beautifully written. So actually, when you first discovered the photos, you had to look at the photo very carefully because it really wasn't initially to most of your other family members, two women. So
No.
talk about that. You had to go through and you were carefully looking at their clothes as well.
Yeah. When I first saw the photos, I'm like, oh, this is, my grandma Ruby's wedding photos. And I was like, oh, this is cool because I had never met my grandfather. So I wanted to see what he looked like. So I'm like looking at the photos, and it says our wedding underneath there. So it was very clearly a wedding photo. And my grandmother was standing there holding a bouquet of flowers, had a wedding dress on. And the gentleman standing to her left had a nice, very nice suit, boutonniere on his collar and a bower hat on. And it was very clearly a wedding setting. It wasn't, you couldn't say it was anything other than that. But when I was looking at the photos, I was just thinking that something didn't look right about the gentleman in the photos. And then I started looking a little bit farther into it. And then I realized that, oh my gosh, their features were very small, very petite. The jackets didn't fit well at all. They were kind of falling off the shoulders. The sleeves are too long. The cuffs have been rolled up. And then it kind of just hit me that, oh my gosh, this is not a man standing next to my grandmother. This is a woman dressed as the groom. And the effect that it had on me was profound. It was as much as I've always been loved by my family, and even though I'm gay or they've always loved me for who I am, and I've felt always very blessed to have that. But I think whenever you're young or whenever you're different, you should always feel a little bit like the square peg. And so I think finding those photos it kind of resonated with me that, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one in my family that loves the way I love. And it just is that day, that evening I would cry. I would just look at the photos. And even the next day, I would look at them again and I would just feel warm. I would just feel happy. I felt lighter. Well, physically, I felt lighter. And so, and I do talk about that in the book, in the first part. It's just feeling that warmth of acceptance and knowing that I'm not the only one anymore was just really profound. And by this time, I'm almost 50 years old when I found the photos. So it's, spending a good part of my life feeling like I'm the only one, as much as I feel loved, being the only one is sometimes difficult.
Yes, absolutely. So then you actually went to talk to your mother, but you couldn't really find any other family members that would really share anything with you.
No, that's a funny thing. My mom, she had dementia, and I think she knew more than she was really willing to tell me. But because of the dementia, I certainly wasn't going to press her on that issue. I talked to my aunt, that's my mother's younger sister at the time, and she didn't have a lot of information. She did reveal some information though, that kind of provided me some insight, which I go into in the book a little bit. But I just thought that it was the boxes almost took on a separate life of their own, just realizing from how many places the boxes must have traveled, in the course from 1921 to 2010 when I found them. It had to have just gone on this incredible journey with my grandmother. I just kind of started envisioning, what kind of journey would that be, and imagining, what it would have been like to have been gay back then. And I was kind of thought, well, gosh, would I be as strong as my grandmother was? And what would have been like to be gay back then? And the fear that you must have had, but at the same time, knowing who you love is right there, and not being able to do anything is, I think, probably it's got to be torturous. So I really, I just think that she was probably one of the bravest people I know. And, I knew my grandmother before she passed, and I wish I knew her better. I wish I would have known her better to ask her, some questions. I was pretty young when she passed away. I was 16. And, I always, people always say, oh, if you had that one person in history to ask a question to, who would that one person be? And it would be absolutely my grandmother. I would have to ask her, what was it like, and how, wow, I would just be in awe of the stories that she could tell me and share with me, and how hard it must have been for her at the same time.
Absolutely. Very, very difficult. So she had a hard time with her father as well. Her father, and then it was kind of an arranged marriage for her as well, because conventionally that's what she needed to do. And
Right.
his fiance had gone off to World War I, and then did come back.
Right.
And they had to get married, and that's where you kind of end the story.
Yeah, and they both, had to do their patriotic duty. That was kind of expected of you back then. And some of the letters that I have that my grandmother saved, and she did write to my grandfather when he was in war in Europe, and I have those letters, but it was all very cordial, not love letters by any means. And in the photos of their wedding versus, in 1921 versus 1915 are vastly different. I mean, there's her wedding pictures to my grandfather. It's remorseful. It's pretty sad to look at those photos. And I really didn't include those photos because it's sad enough. And I think, everyone hoped that it would be a happy ending. I've heard some people say, well, I wish it was a happy ending. I'm like, I know I wish it was a happy ending too, but I wouldn't be here to tell you the story if it was a happy ending. So I have to say that I'm here, and I believe I'm here for the reason to tell their story. And that's kind of has been my mission for the last over 10 years, is to tell their story. Just so I can get it out there.
So did you end up knowing Arnold, who she married?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
I never met him. Now, he left the family in 1939, right during the Great Depression. He left his entire family penniless.
He disappeared, or he died?
No, he disappeared. He left. I know where he went to, but he physically walked away from the family in 1939.
Oh, because he wasn't happy to get married either.
Right. Well, no, that's my speculation, and there's some information I have that I might kind of pursue. Where he went to and what he may have done after his marriage, and what he would have done with his life between 1939 and when he passed away. But he passed away quite old, so I have a feeling that there might be a little bit of a story there to tell as well.
Do you think you'll pursue that and write that story as well? Or
There's some storylines that I was really drawn to when I was writing, but I didn't go into them much further that I would like to pursue. I probably pursue them more as a historical fiction book with maybe a little bit of mystery involved, because there was an incident that happened with Ralph, the band leader, that he kind of disappeared, and there was a lot of speculation what happened to Ralph. And so there's some really fun things that I found in the doing my research that I would really like to pursue, but I would probably do it more of a total historical fiction. I found that it was difficult sometimes writing a story based on real people and events, that I had to really lock myself into in trying to figure out how all this could have happened, and putting faces together with names was pretty intense sometimes, but I thought it was important to try to do that whenever possible, to have the authenticity and being able to put the names and the faces together. Especially, with the woman that was in the wedding photos with my grandmother, I found out who she was because I knew her first name. And then I started going through newspaper articles in the archives, and I started looking for her first name. And in a small town, ironically, there was kind of a little gossip magazine that they had. So they had people would visit from out of town. They would have all that would be in the newspaper. I'm still kind of boggled to this day how so much detailed information got into the newspapers when nobody had obviously internet or connection or even a phone for that matter. So to me, it was really pretty funny and interesting at the same time, as far as how information was published in the local newspaper. But luckily it was published, because I was able to kind of put the pieces together and identify people. And because also the archives have going to newspapers.com or what's the other, ancestry.com. I used a lot of those to look for photos from college photos, and kind of matching up the names and trying to kind of put the pieces together then. And I would also use the newspaper articles for events, especially when it came to some of the parties that were held exclusively for women. And there was a character in the book that was pretty well known for having events strictly for women. And I talk about that, but it was a lot of fun playing with that, because the photos themselves are just so revealing to me. There's a lot of, my grandmother was really good at writing captions underneath the photos. So she would have a lot of really fun, clever captions that, I kind of would go with that and let my imagination take me down the path of what may have led up to that photo being taken in a little town in the middle of Wisconsin.
yeah, so you have some wonderful photos in the book. This is the one
Yes.
from Stephen's journal, 1911. And then you have photos of lots of family members. So it's very interesting to see them and see what you're actually talking about. And you have pictures of them with cars and where they're going. And that's how you actually were able to go to the town and identify where it was taken by the trees, even though they were larger than initially in 1919.
Exactly.
But Ruby also had a sister that knew what helped her with her wedding.
Yeah, she was actually in a lot of the photos with my grandmother. So they were all there was three of them, and the two girls remained, because it's a large family, were fairly close in age. So there's speculation, I obviously I couldn't talk to anybody there. So there was speculation because her sister was there in some of the photos, how much she knew. She must have known a lot, or must have known pretty much everything. Accepting and how she accepted it's hard to say, but I have to imagine that she did accept it. Under what circumstances she did, I'm not, I was all speculation from on my part.
Oh, I wondered if you had talked to then her daughter or granddaughter or something and had followed it.
Yeah, I tried to reach out a couple of times, but I didn't get a lot of response back. So I kind of like left it at that because I didn't want to, there's a whole family that my relatives that I've never met before. And I was kind of, I sent them an email and I sent some photos and they said, okay. And I just really didn't hear anything back from them, a thank you. And I was like, okay, maybe that's all it needs to be is simply a touch base with them. But I really do hope that at some point I can kind of go back there again. I would love to go back to Amherst, Wisconsin. Again, I mean, it was a lovely town and they had this wonderful old music hall that when I was finishing the book had not yet been renovated, but my understanding is now that it's been renovated and they're still working on it. But kind of a dream of mine is to get back to Amherst, Wisconsin and go through the old music hall where my grandmother had gone through and just walk through it and just kind of imagine what may have happened there, so long ago.
So you said that you weren't a writer before this, you were a bank examiner. So then when you decided you wanted to do it, you got yourself a writing coach.
Yes.
So perhaps people that are listening today, they want to tell their family story. So what would be the first thing that they would do? Did you talk into a tape recorder or did you just start writing?
I just started writing. It was a story that honestly was going over and over in my head. And I think I started writing it only because it would wake me up at night. I would have to write it down. So I just started writing the things that I just kept on imagining what may have happened back then. I started just writing all that down. And, I go, well, this is, if everybody's insisting that I have to write this story, well, I'm going to do the best I can. So I did hire a writing coach. She was wonderful. I also went into join like critique groups and writing groups in Pasadena and in this area and just worked with them. And it's really important to kind of, if you're going to go into it, I did kind of a full immersive adventure on that. I attended writing conferences in Pasadena here. There's a really big one that's coming up here, I think in October. Went there and met some really amazing people, amazing writers. And, I think just talking to writers, I was just so in awe. And it was kind of like, I couldn't believe I was there because I was never even academically, I was not even really that good in high school and college. I was more of a music major. So, writing a book was just not in my scope. But it turned out that the story needed to be told. And I happen to be the one that's going to tell it. I also found that just being in a library, I did a lot of writing, pre-pandemic. I went to libraries just to write because it was quiet there. And I just kind of loved the fact that I was sitting in this room with thousands of books around me with all these people. I could always imagine like, wow, and all of the thousands of hours and how much time it's taken people to write a book. And I'm like, wow, it was really inspiring to me. And just being in that room with so many books, I don't know, I just love books now. So it's kind of a late life passion of mine and that's, I guess my message is that if you have a story to tell, don't be afraid to tell it. It doesn't have to be the best story in the world. It doesn't have to be, award winning or anything else. It's just going to be a story, and that comes from your heart. And so I tell people, just go for it. Just get those stories out there and write them, because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to.
Right. Well, they say everyone has a story to tell.
I
And
100% believe
everybody
that.
should tell a story. So how did you select your title? Did your publisher help you with that? Don't you dare?
No, what it was is that is actually one of my grandmother's photos. And it had my grandma was standing on a rock. I don't know if I have probably a blown up picture. And I probably a lot of these photos you can also, if you go to my website at gaylaturner.com, I also have a lot of the photos on my website as well. But this particular photo was taken as my grandmother was like standing on a rock in over by her home, and another one is standing there looking up at my grandmother. And right as my grandmother is leaning down to kiss her, it's the photo is taken, and underneath her photo it says, "Don't you dare." And I just thought, gosh, that kind of says everything about, because it was really sweet. It was them doing something courageous because they knew this is pretty racy stuff for that time. And they did that, and she kept those photos. And I thought that was just one of the bravest photos I've ever seen in my life. And that's where I just wanted to honor that. And that's where the name of the book came from. I never thought of it in any other way. It was not like I played with photos or with titles. I just said, this is what the title is.
Excellent title. Excellent title. So Gayla is here to answer any questions that anyone has. So if you want to put your questions in chat, also we have in chat, I've just put in her website, and also you can go and read the Pasadena Now article that is very detailed, and Gayla was interviewed for that. And if you have any questions, please put it in there. Anything about how you would write. You also went to a lot of cemeteries.
I did.
Which was that was a lot, and lots of cemeteries.
I did. But I was getting good at it, because I would go there and with a little rag, I'd go there and, I'd wipe off their headstones and things like that. But, it was part of that process that I had to kind of go to, and it was kind of surreal to walk to a cemetery, and after I finally found where my family's site was, there was a lot of people there I knew, and I only knew them because I had done a lot of research before I got there and started realizing, oh my God, I know him, I know her, and there's Cora, and it was pretty funny, because I was literally laughing to myself in the cemetery, because I'm like, oh my God, I know who all you people are, and I'm here to say hello. And I'm like, it was a fun little party that, I just think it's so important that our ancestors were there. And it's so important to share those stories of our ancestors and honoring our ancestors. And I think I know I felt that kind of that appreciation for, okay, I can almost hear my great grandmother saying, "Oh, look, she's all the way here from California." And so it was kind of like this big welcome home party for me. I don't know how else to describe it, but I thought it was very sweet. And I didn't write about that. I wrote about it in some respect, but I just kind of just thought that was really pretty cool. And so, yeah, I did a lot of time at cemeteries. I just wanted to connect with people, and I felt that was another way for me to connect with the people that I read about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So Tim McDonald has his hand up. Tim, do you have a question that you would like to ask?
Thank you, Christine, and hello, Gayla. My name's Tim McDonald. I'm the acting library director for the Pasadena Public Library, and I wanted to thank you so much for your presentation today and all of the work that went into the book too. Christine, thank you for organizing the program. I wanted to say that Pasadena really does strive to be an inclusive city that affirms that the diversity of our community is a strength. And your book and your presentation today, I think, really underlines that the importance of diversity and inclusiveness. And I wanted to thank you for your remarks about how libraries were an inspiration to you, and the value that libraries brought to you as a writer too. particularly this time of year during Pride Month, it's I have a wonderful job, but one of the really special things that happens during Pride Month is I get to receive comments from the public about their gratitude for the programs, the book displays, the bulletin boards we have up that really show that libraries are a safe place where you can come and not be judged. And I think that your program and your book today are just a really wonderful fit for us to let everybody know that libraries are for everyone and everyone's stories are important. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it means a lot to us. I'll add to your comment about everybody's got a story about a relative that they wondered about. I lived the first 45 years of my life thinking I was the only gay member of my family, to find out that my maternal grandmother was a lesbian, which I found out again after she passed away, though. So it's kind of, like it's kind of one of those kind of little bit of a sad story and a happy story, like I think all these stories that, like yours, that let people know that you're part of a community, you're not alone, is really important. So I'm grateful to you for sharing your personal story, because it really does help a lot of people. And again, I think that I'm particularly happy to host you here in the library, because I think libraries are valued by a lot of gay, lesbian, LGBT members of the community, because they know they're a safe place where you can come and not be judged. And so hats off to you. Thanks. It's really wonderful program. And Christine, again, thanks for coordinating it for us. That's it. No question, just a little editorial. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, I echo all your comments, Tim. We are just delighted to welcome Gayla. And as I said in the introduction, it's wonderful that we are a safe place, and libraries are there for absolutely everybody in our community. And it's very important to present these programs so that everybody feels welcome and inclusive as well. And we can't thank you enough, Gayla, and we're delighted to have your book in the collection. People are saying that your website is awesome. Yes, it is absolutely awesome. And we have the website gaylaturner.com in the chat. And I want to remind everyone that currently this book will be cataloged for the Pasadena Public Library. And Gayla actually is going to donate 2 more copies to us, so that we will have a total of 3 copies in the Pasadena Public Library, which is very generous of her to do so for us. And we thank you very much.
It's sold out on Amazon, which is a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So
right. Yes, we were lucky to get, you donated this copy. We were not able to get additional copies. So yes, you can tell how important it is if it's completely sold out at Amazon, because and Romans doesn't have a copy.
Well, they should have a couple left. I took some. So they can.
Well, they might have just received them then.
Yeah. So I drove up there and delivered some books to them, but they said if you need some more, to let me know, because I have a couple of boxes. So Romans does have the book available right now.
Okay. Right. Then
can be found in the new authors section on the wall.
Right. And so if people want to go get their own copy, please do so. And remember, I said at the beginning that Gayla very nicely has allowed us to record the event, and it will be on YouTube, Pasadena Public Library. So very important for you to share with other people and other friends and family members as well. And I hope you've seen our Off the Shelf, and we have several other Pride programs in our Off the Shelf, and that is on page 6 as well. So people want to know, did you edit any part of the book? Did you leave anything out?
I think there was some, it was very small edits that I made on it. So I hired a professional writing coach. I did go through edits, but I really didn't edit that much, quite honestly. The story is, for example, there's some letters that my grandmother had written the night before she married my grandfather. And those letters are exactly as written from her. So there's nothing that I necessarily kept out. There was some of the storylines that I would like to pursue in maybe another book, though. I don't think were relevant to the book as it was written and Don't You Dare, that I would probably write another book and include those details.
Thank you very much. So someone else wants to know, how important is it to you that our stories are not banned? Well, it's very important.
It's
I mean,
huge.
I can answer that. It's very, very important that they're not banned.
Oh, it's frightening. And I think, and then that doesn't, that's part of the reality nowadays, is that this book could be banned or will be banned in certain states. So I think our representation it matters so much, especially right now, to be representing the LGBTQ community and just getting the word out there that, we've always been here. We're always going to be here. We're not going to go away. So, they can try to get rid of us, trying to erase some of our words, and so we just can't let that happen. And it's important that we tell our story. The representation has to be there, and our message has to be there that, we've always been there. We've played a vital role in society for forever, since Caesar era. So we've always been here playing a role in society. And we just have to have that representation. Part of that is telling the story and telling especially the story for our young people, because they are our future, and it's important that we let them know that our job is not done. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go in our LGBT community and making sure that we're protected.
So someone else wants to know, what was the hardest scene part for you to write?
The last scene, I can't really go into it too much. I think that the last scene was probably the hardest. I think the inevitable is that my grandmother could not live her life with the woman she loved. I think we all know that. I'm not giving away a big part of the story, but I think, I always wanted a happy ending myself, but I just knew in some respects that couldn't happen in the sense of how life was back then. It was so almost impossible to have a happy ending if you were LGBTQ. So I think that was the hardest part for me, is just kind of coming to terms with that. And that kind of took a lot out of me, and it took me a while to kind of work through it.
So you also mentioned Rebecca's and Oddfellows. Were those really groups that people from the LGBT community could join? Were they more recognized at that time, just kind of hidden?
Yeah. I think, the Rebeccas were a part of the Goodfellow group, but one of the primary characters, being Cora, she was a member there, and I found that out because, of course, when she went to a Rebecca convention, her name was in there, and then I started wanting to understand that organization, and the organization itself was all about love, and because she was kind of the ringleader of this group of women that would get together, I just kind of thought that makes perfect sense, that she was a person that was there to bring people together. And it was this kind of that string that would tie everybody together, and that was all based on love. And so that's kind of where, once again, that is my how I assume that it would happen, or surmise. But that just makes sense to me, that's why she did what she was doing, because she believed in love.
Right. And there is an Oddfellow cemetery in Los Angeles. Are you aware of
I
that?
didn't know that.
I didn't know whether that was fit into the story in a way.
Interesting.
So someone wants to know, do you have a book you would recommend besides your wonderful book? Are there do you have other favorite books that, did you read books as you were writing this story?
You know, I read memoirs when I was reading this because telling a story about myself or including a story with myself was really hard for me. I'm not necessarily a very open book, so to speak. So I read a lot of memoirs and things like that to kind of get my creative juices flowing as far as how would a person tell their own story. I wasn't real clear on that. So I did a lot of reading, reading books about how to write a book. Stephen King has a wonderful book about how to write a book. And I was just like, okay, this is perfect. So I did a lot of reading and I could not, I was just like a sponge. I could not read enough of any one thing. I was just constantly reading about writing and how to write. And it almost got to the point of where I had to stop reading so much about how to write and just write. And that was a part of my lesson that I had to go through, is learning to kind of trust myself and the story, because the storyline itself of weaving myself into a story and also weaving history it's a concept that is a little dangerous, because the book itself is, so some readers don't want to read autobiography. They want to read historical fiction. Some people want to read historical, and so it's hard to, when you're weaving both of those genres together, it's always kind of the danger of that is that you're not going to make everybody happy. So I kind of just had to tell the story that was rolling around in my head. And so after I did all my reading about how to write, I finally kind of said, okay, I'm just going to write what I feel needs to be told.
Well, we're very glad that you did, and a very important book to write, and we're delighted to have it in the Pasadena Public Library. So are there any other questions that anybody wants to put? Someone said that we should put it in the little free libraries around in Pasadena, and there are quite a number of them. When you drive around in Pasadena and South Pasadena, I have found a lot of little free libraries in the different communities. Perhaps you have as well when you've driven around.
I have, and that's a brilliant idea.
Yes, I hadn't thought about that.
I know what I'll be doing this weekend.
You'll be doing this weekend. Well, it's a fabulous book to share, and we thank you very much. It's a very important book to share with the community. We are very proud of all the accomplishments of the LGBTQ community, and we thank you very much for sharing this with us. Please remember that this book, Don't You Dare, will be in the Pasadena Public Library that you can check out. You can put a hold on it. So Gayla has said that she has taken some just recently too of Romans, and you can purchase one. And it sounds like she might be putting them in the little free libraries for the community. And we will look forward to your next book, Gayla. So please be in touch with us, and please everyone share. We'll have it up in about a week. It takes a little while to get it from the cloud. Today's program was recorded to the cloud, and so it'll be on YouTube, Pasadena Library, for you to share with your family and friends. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you all. Happy Pride Month.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.